Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. I'm Rob and today we're going to be painting some Atlantian Spears. I was basically incepted by my friend Dan, who was asking about how we'd go about doing this chapter, which is a Successors chapter for the Blood Angels, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to give it a go. I really like teal as a colour, so I'm going to give this a whirl, and I'm really pleased with how it came out. So we're going to go through and we're going to paint it, and then by the end of this video you will have a painted Atlantian Spear Marine. So we're going to start with a black undercoat, and then we're going to use a base coat of Temple Gate Teal from the Army Painter. I've thinned this probably with about 2 parts thinner to 1 part paint. It is quite a thick paint, the Army Painter Fanatic paints, but they do airbrush quite nicely, I found, and I didn't need to do a pre-highlight of white to be able to kind of increase the opacity of the paint and the vibrancy of the paint. I find that with these colours, because there's quite a lot of pigment within them, you can just build them up over a black base coat and it'll be fine. We're going to move to Pharoah Guard next, which is within that teal triad. And then what we're going to do here, we're probably covering around, I would say, about 50% to 60% of the model with this colour. We're choosing 2 light sources, one from the front coming in at a 45-degree angle, and then one from the back coming in from a 45-degree angle. So you'll notice that the 2 sides of the Space Marine are in shadow, and then the front is obviously highlighted here. And the thing about Space Marines is they've got these really nice kind of like domed features from the kind of the vents on the back, the helmet, the shoulder pads, the knee pads, which is just great for kind of like airbrush highlighting. You don't need to be a pro at this. I have quite a precise airbrush, so it makes it a little bit easier. But even with a cheaper airbrush, with a little bit of trigger control, you can get some quite tight highlights. But this is I would say is relatively quite broad. And then these are also good because you're not mixing. Like if you use the teals within the flexible triad, you can just work your way through them, or pick 3 out of the 6 and just work your way up. So that's quite nice that you're not mixing, because often in these videos I do quite a lot of mixing, so just having like a set recipe is sometimes useful. We're going to go straight to Aqua Alchemy, which is quite high on the triad. This is quite a light color rather than a bright color, a light color. And what you can see me doing here is just being quite tight with the highlight now. Like we're kind of highlighting the final 20% of this marine, of this Space Marine. One other thing I would say is you don't have to highlight your Marines this way. There's lots of different ways to highlight Marines. Like I've seen the legs have kind of like 2 bands of light going down them. That's pretty common with primaris and how people might do them. This is just the way that I would go about doing it, especially for like a tutorial. It's fairly straightforward, and it's also fairly logical in my head about how light hits spheres and cylinders as well. But it's quite some dynamic highlighting without too much kind of, I wouldn't say too much skill involved in this. But yeah, as I said before, it's nice to have like the set scheme, the set like colors, so we don't have to do much mixing. We're going to go back to Temple Gate Teal, and we're really going to thin this down now, and this is going to be our shade color. So it is the original color that we used, but this is going to help us just to tighten up the highlights a little bit more. And I would say this is probably like 6 parts thinner to 1 part paint. So it's a very, very thin kind of glaze consistency, a wash consistency, whatever you want to call it. It's very thin, but what it does, it just tightens everything up, just going back in with that original color. And because it's a glaze, you kind of have those soft transitions where you're hitting it. And you could see me there not hitting it in the highlights, but hitting it in the shadows on the side of the model. We're going to go in with Aqua Alchemy now. And what I've done is I've just gone around and edge highlighted everything with Aqua Alchemy. Now, this was obviously the highlight color that we used, but for the edge highlight, it's ideal. I'm not going to go through kind of showing you how to kind of edge highlight, but then we hit it with the next highlight color. And what you can see me doing here is just being a little bit tighter with those highlights, and just trying to keep it within the highlight. So pretty, I don't know, this is beyond what I would usually do for these videos, but the primaris are actually quite nice for kind of doing a little bit of edge highlighting and rendering these shapes in this way. So I think it's worth taking a little bit of time, especially for like 1 character model. Microset and microsol. So I gloss varnished the model, and then I apply the micro set, so the blue one, the number 1, it literally says number 1 on it, and then I take my transfer, apply it with a brush, and then you can make tiny adjustments with a blade, with a hobby knife, with a scalpel, whatever. I just find that rather than adjusting it with a brush, which sometimes can knock it in ways that you're not intending, just kind of making corrections with the blade is slightly easier, you have a bit more control. I didn't at the time have any kind of Atlantian spear transfers, so I'm just using some transfers from, I think, the Black Shields sheets from Warhammer the Horus Heresy. I think that's where they're from, just because I thought they were sort of Atlantian spear like and quite interesting. But since then I have got some Atlantian spear transfers, which I will use on some other future primaris space marine models. You can see me just struggling to actually get it off here. I do find though that doing it on a little tray like this is sometimes easier than just putting it in like a bowl of water and you're fishing around with it. And I'd recommend kitchen roll to do this on rather than toilet roll, because the toilet roll will just disintegrate on your brush. So kitchen roll, definitely. And then from here, once I probably give it about 10-20 minutes, those transfers just to set. And then we're going to use the micro sol, and we're going to dip that into with a Q-tip, a cotton wool bud. We'll dip that into the pot, and then we just press this against our transfers, and then rolling it gently over will just help it adhere and melt to the bends and the curves, because all these transfers are obviously on bends and curves. And then we're going to go in with Brigadine Brown, a really nice chipping colour. I don't really want to get into what colour armoured ceramite is. It's totally up to you, but I'm using this brown colour because it contrasts so nicely against the green or the teal. I would avoid though using silver for this, because I think silver's so light against what is quite light in those highlights. I don't think it would be necessarily suitable. So use Brigadine Brown, a dark brown colour, and I think works for kind of like the ceramite underneath. You could use a dark grey colour as well, I think, if you want to be more kind of accurate in terms of what ceramite might look like. And then what I've done here, the areas, so I just pick out areas with a sponge. I take most of the paint off on a dry surface on the sponge, but sometimes the sponge just can't get into some of the nooks and crannies, and you just might want to add a few scratches here and there on the armor plate where you get streaks coming down. But there are some places where I think it's worth just going in with a brush just to add a few more scratches in. And then we're going to go in with burnt umber and lamp black. Now, I'd say the mixture is probably about 4 parts burnt umber to 1 part lamp black. I actually think on reflection that you could probably just use burnt umber and it would still look pretty good. I've got a little metal ramekin dish here, and I've mixed it with some white spirit. And really, you want the consistency of maybe just a little bit thicker than milk, but you want it to leave the oils behind when you apply it to the model. You want it to essentially pin line and pin wash that model. You don't want it kind of just separating and disappearing, and that's always, I think, the test. Sometimes I put it on the model and I go, oh no, that's way too thin. So sometimes it just requires a little bit of an adjustment, but you'll be able to see in a moment kind of like what it should look like when you apply it. Now, before we apply our oils though, I do give the model another gloss varnish, and that just protects all the battle damage, all the transfers, and the paint job. So you're locking in every step along the way that you've done, and you're protecting every step along the way. The reason I like to use a gloss varnish is because I can clean up these oils a little bit later and not worry about kind of affecting the paint job, affecting the transfers in particular, or affecting the battle damage that I've just spent some time doing. And you can see how what's left behind there. You can see actually kind of it's quite thick, it's going into the nooks and crannies, and actually there are areas that I'm hitting here where it looks a little bit unsightly. That's absolutely fine. I'm not worried about that at all. It's not like it's a black wash that I'm putting on, and where I have to be super careful. With the oils, I've got a little bit of flexibility to be a little bit messier. Of course, I don't want to slop them all over because that will affect the underlying color that I put down. And I really, really like this teal color. So I don't want to affect it too much, especially not in those highlights. And the moment you slap oils onto a color, it will filter the color. It will change the color slightly. You'll be able to bring it back if you wipe it away, of course. But actually, I think that it's fair to say that once you put the oil down, it's the same if you've ever used streaking grime. It doesn't matter how much you try and clean that up, that will always affect the underlying color underneath, and the same to some extent is true with oils. So go around, apply this to the whole model, and you'll get something that looks like this. And then with a cotton wool bud dipped in some white spirit, but you could always use like a little makeup kind of like removers, but with a cotton wool bud, dropped in some clean white spirit, you can just then wipe away any excess where it looks a little bit unsightly. If there's places where the cotton wool bud can't get into, you can always dip a clean brush into some clean white spirit and then just kind of like wick it away. I would say I gave this probably about an hour or two to dry. Some people like to leave them overnight. That's absolutely fine. That makes a lot of sense. But I'm always concerned that if you don't do the cleanup fairly quickly, it can stain the underlying color underneath. Then I gave it a matte spray. And then we've got this lovely kind of like matte color. And then we've got all our edge highlights here. And then we've got all our battle damage. And then it's pin lined and pin washed as well. And then I'm going to do all the details. So you can see me here doing white on all the cables and all the soft armor joints. You could paint these silver, like a gunmetal color, and then wash them with like a black wash. That's absolutely fine. I think for soft armor joints, I think for me, I've now tended more towards doing them black. But for my Alpha Legion, I tend to do them silver because that's just the general theme that I've gone for. And then we're going to go back in with Grim Dark speed paint. And then just one coat of this. It doesn't need a second coat. And then that just kind of highlights the soft armor joints absolutely enough. And if you want to enhance it with some further grey highlights, you absolutely can do that. But this is enough. And I've also used this on the plume on the helmet as well. You can make the plume red. I think red would look really nice. I just decided for this particular one to go black. This is really a tester model to see whether I want to do a larger kind of like primaris force. So I was just playing around with things. Death Metal and Greedy Gold. We're going to mix those two together. I would say probably about 2 parts Greedy Gold to 1 part Death Metal. I've used this in a recent tutorial as well, and I found that I really love the combination of these two colours. Really, really nice. And if the army painter is watching this, then they can call it Meta's Metal or something like that. Those two colours mixed together. And then we're going to use dark red tone. And then we're going to use this as a wash. The washes from the army painter, I find, don't tend to matte down the metallic, so they still maintain their luster. But I think that having the red as a wash works really well for these golds because it contrasts against the teal armor, and you can see on there already actually kind of it makes quite an interesting juxtaposition of colors there. And then you can do any highlights with a little bit of greedy gold as well if you wanted to highlight further there. Let's go on to the purity seal. So paint it all white, matte white, and then we're going to go in with high dweller purple just on this purity seal here. We're on the wax part. You could do some further highlights if you wanted. I didn't bother. I didn't feel kind of there was any need to. And then for the actual scroll work, I'm going to go in with pallid bone. And these are just really simple, straightforward. Like we spent a long time edge highlighting the armor, and spent a long time kind of like doing a few highlights on the gold. And I didn't need any more than this. So these are the smaller details that I'm not going to worry too much about. And I knew I was going to spend a long time on the OSL as well. So I haven't gone through how to paint this OSL. For me personally, I am still trying to develop my OSL skills, and I felt it was important with this piece for actually me to take my time. I'm always constantly worried about plateauing, and so it's important, I think, for me to kind of say, actually I need to spend a little bit more time on particular aspects. I know the OSL isn't perfect, and it's something that I am working on at the moment and would like to work on between now and the end of 2024, but this was just done with reds and oranges, creating kind of a glaze around the outside with some reds. I think that one person I would go to if you're looking for kind of OSL tutorials is Juan Hidalgo Miniatures. I think he does some really good OSL work and some great techniques for kind of like either dry brushing, but also spending more time with like brushwork as well. So definitely somebody I can recommend. But as I say, this for me, I just wanted to spend a bit of my own time, my own painting time to develop those techniques. And then this is the finished model. I did the base using some liquid weathering powders, which I've done a whole video about. And you know, nice orange base to contrast against the teal armor. And I think it works really effectively. I think that, you know, these are lots of these skills are things that I would typically use in Horus Heresy. So it's nice to bring them over to 40k and see what we can do with Primaris Marines. Love them or hate them, Primaris Marines are actually great canvases for lots of color schemes. But also, they're nice big flat panels to be able to do those highlights on, to do like battle damage, do streaking, put weathering powders on. Like, love them or hate them, you can't, you know, they are great canvases for doing these kinds of paint jobs on. So I hope this video has been useful for you, as well as Atlantian Spears. This also works well for Sons of Horus if you want to use this for our Sons of Horus scheme. But I'm hoping to do more Atlantian Spears in the near future, and keep an eye out for some Sanguinary Guard that hopefully will be coming next month. I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. If you've got any feedback for me, if you've got any really some ideas about exactly what you want me to kind of look at and do next, that would be absolutely brilliant. All ideas are welcome. And I just really appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this video, and I really hope this has been useful. I try and respond to all comments, but obviously there is a lot of them, and just one man trying to manage all his social media accounts can sometimes be a little bit overwhelming, while also trying to manage my own kind of commission painting job, creating videos, etc. So if I don't get back to you, it's not because I'm purposely avoiding you or not answering back, but I will try and get back to all comments as and when I can. But as I say, if you like the video, don't forget to like and subscribe and all those things that you come to expect from YouTubers asking you to do those things. But yeah, just take the time, just write a little comment, would be really nice, because it just helps boost, I'm sure, the algorithm, and helps to promote the channel as well. Anyway, take care, guys, and I'll see you on the next one.